On behalf of all of my colleagues, I'm thrilled to welcome you all today on this, at least where I am sitting, dreary, rainy morning, so I'm glad to be spending it with you. I'm Katie Shanahan-Lindner. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for European Studies. And again, on behalf of all of my colleagues, thank you for joining us. Thank you for being here. It's really exciting for us today to be able to showcase our resources to you, but most importantly, we're here to hear from you. And we're so grateful to our speakers. Thank you all for being here and sharing your experiences. And we're so looking forward to hearing from all the participants about new ideas and collaborations. So today is also a big listening day for us. So I'd like to, this does not just happen through one person. A big shout out to all of my colleagues who've made today possible. And I want to just mention every center, because there are 5 centers here represented today, and everyone can give a quick wave. And if you feel like you want to unmute, please do so. So we'll start with the African Studies Center. Is anybody here yet from African Studies? I can't see. Okay, we can, well, I see Kevin from Asian Studies, Carolina Asia Center.
Hey, y'all, thanks for joining.
Great. Isa, Beatrice is right there, and Korean.
Yep, I'm here, and Corinne is here as well.
Great. The Middle East Studies Center.
Hi, good morning.
Emma and hi. Great to see you. And of course, the Center for European Studies, that's me, and the 2 Allisons, Allison Rinker and Allison Haskins. And thanks so much to you both for the all the help prepping, and of course, for moderating today, and Allison Rinker for being our #1 tech person. So thank you. Great. So African Studies will be joining shortly, and they will.
I'm here.
Oh, there. Yes, of course. Rose, you're here. Yes, we're waiting for Ada though. She'll be joining too, so she can give a wave when she joins. So thank you so much to everyone. I'm going to turn it over to Beatrice, who will tell us a little bit more about what's in store today. Thank you.
Great. And are we going to be moving through the slides? Will they see the agenda slide?
I'm going to start sharing now.
Okay. All right. So yes, I am Beatriz Rifkon Muñiz from the Institute for the Study of the Americas and the Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies at UNC and Duke. It's a mouthful. This is the second symposium in 4 years where we come together to examine shared collaborations and to learn from each other about ways to integrate regional and global content into the curriculum. The area study centers at UNC and Duke, many, I believe all of them here today supported by National Resource Center grants, although there are a few more at UNC as well, are committed to creating spaces for exchanging ideas, resources, and best practices that will help students understand the world a little more and inspire them to ask questions and seek knowledge from multiple perspectives. Today's speakers have been doing this for a long time at their colleges and universities and throughout their careers. They have an impressive track record of work across many world regions. Our centers have had the opportunity to work with them, some over many years and across multiple centers. And we thank them all for coming today to share their experience and expertise. Today, we will explore just a sample of excellent projects. In this zoomed world, we are zipping by. We will be together for just a few hours and everything will move rather quickly from one session to the other. We will cover much in the 2 main presentations that you're seeing on your panel, making connections across borders with Russell Smith, Matthew Cook, and Rose Sakifield, and tailoring the global to fit your local with Shannon Hahn, Sharon Roberts, and Melissa Bice. And then, of course, we will close. We have a half an hour of a closing session with Q&A that will also lead us into evaluation. Fabiola Salas Villalobos is here with us today. I don't know if Fabiola could give a wave. She will be conducting the evaluation. There is a survey, I believe, that will be shared with all participants, and also a session after the closing Q&A with the speakers. And we hope that you will have an opportunity there to tell us about best practices, what has worked, what has been, what are the challenges that we confront as we try to create these opportunities for our students. Without further delay, I guess, let's see who is next. I think Emma and Ada are going to be presenting the next slide.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Emma Harbour, and I'm the Director of Outreach for the Duke UNC Consortium for Middle East Studies. And I just want to thank you all again for joining us this morning. We're really excited to hear from our panelists and to engage in conversation with everybody attending. So I have the true honor of presenting this slide about the different kinds of collaborations, professional development opportunities, and resources that our 5 centers at UNC and Duke offer. We offer a wide range of activities to promote the globalization of curriculum in North Carolina and across the Southeast, and to engage in partnership with MSIs and community colleges. And while there's some variation in what each center provides, I will now highlight just the general categories of what we're able to support and provide a few examples for each. This is definitely not comprehensive, but aims to serve as a representation of the resources available. And we really encourage you to visit our websites, and please be in touch if you would like to discuss any of these opportunities further. So I'll begin with curriculum development. Some of our centers provide resources for the development of curriculum on various world regions, or to incorporate global content into your existing courses. And I'll highlight here the UNC Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies, which offers College Educator Research Fellowships, or CERF, and that provides educators the opportunity to work as visiting research scholars with the Latin American and Caribbean library collections at Duke and UNC. Regarding public events, all of our centers run events open to the general public on historic and contemporary issues, on scholarly research, on cultural perspectives, and more. And due to the pandemic, our programming obviously shifted online. And while we anticipate a return to more in-person programming very soon, we will retain an element of virtual programs and events in the future so that you and your students can tune in from afar. Regarding research travel awards, some of our centers offer awards for conference travel support, like the Center for European Studies, and our Consortium for Middle East Studies also supports faculty in attending the fall conference of SERMIS, which is the Southeast Regional Society for Middle East and Islamic Studies. And the African Studies Center welcomes applications for awards on Africa content, including course or curriculum development, research or travel awards, or awards that develop online instructional materials. So there are a lot of different awards available to faculty across the state and Southeast. Some of our centers provide conference support or regional studies networks. Our centers are connected with regional networks dedicated to our world regions across the Southeast. And I'll highlight here the Carolina Asia Center, which runs the Asia Scholars Network, which is an annual conference bringing together experts on Asia from colleges, universities, and community colleges in North Carolina. And last year, given the virtual opportunities, it even grew to the Southeast Conference of the Association for Asian Studies. So we definitely encourage you to get connected with your colleagues beyond state lines, beyond county lines, and to meet others interested in global studies. I'll note study tours next. I know that everyone is excitedly anticipating a return to travel, both domestic and international. And when that can happen, I'll highlight the Center for European Studies, which takes MSI and community college educators to Brussels annually for free for a week-long in-depth look at EU institutions, which is a great opportunity and as a great trip every year. And I know that other centers take teachers or educators abroad in different capacities, so definitely stay tuned for future opportunities as we return to traveling. The next category is resources, and you'll see a very long list here that I will not read to you, but just know that the centers collectively offer a wide variety of materials and resources on our different world regions. We can certainly all connect you with the UNC and Duke World Area Librarians. And I will highlight our consortium, which our website houses a wealth of resources specifically on teaching and learning about the Middle East. And we have a multimedia video series entitled Middle East Explained for your own knowledge or for use in your classroom. Videos are about 5 to 10 minutes long and discuss Middle East topics and history. And last but not least, I will mention the Global Distinction Program, which is held in partnership with UNC Worldview. And this is a program specifically for community college faculty, and its full title is the NC Scholar of Global Distinction Program. And as part of this partnership, community colleges and their faculty commit to developing and offering globally intensive courses and activities through which students actually earn a global distinction credential when they graduate. And the program really works to support NC community colleges in creating truly global campuses. So that was a lot of resources all at once, but I hope that it provided a taste of the kinds of things that our centers engage in and want to work with you on. I see my colleague Kevin just put our websites in the chat, so please do visit our websites and feel free to contact us to learn more and find out about all of the different opportunities at the various centers. As I mentioned, we all offer various things, but if you're interested in globalizing your work, there is an opportunity for you. We'd love to work with you and engage with you in our different world regions. So I will turn it back to Beatrice and Katie. Thanks so much.
All right, I was having trouble finding the buttons. So I believe we should get started and start sharing, and that will go to actually to Allison.
Yes.
Where are you? I can't. Oh, there you are.
I'm here. It should pop up now. Yeah, so we'll go ahead and get going. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we'll see where we go from here. But let's go ahead and get started with our first session. The first session we have today with a group of 3 speakers is on making connections across borders. This is a time for speakers that we have here to talk about how they have connected with institutions and partners across the world outside of the US and have been able to use these partnerships and connections to help globalize their curriculum. Just as a heads up, each presentation will be 15 minutes. At the end, we'll have kind of a group Q&A. So if you have any specific questions for the speakers as we go, keep them in mind, write them in the chat, and then we'll have time for a Q&A at the end of all 3. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Russell Smith. He's our first speaker today. He is a professor of geography in the Department of History, Politics, and Social Justice, and the faculty lead for the Spatial Justice Studio at the Center for Design Innovation, SJS at CDI. His research interests include a variety of topics related to spatial justice, including local government boundary change, urban form and the built environment, and urban sustainability. In 2019, Dr. Smith received an award from us, from CES, to engage with European scholars interested in exploring spatial justice. This project seeks to provide a comparative examination into spatial injustice across 2 continents and also connect Dr. Smith with European scholars. To date, he's been successful in connecting with several European spatial justice scholars and is a co-founder of the Spatial Justice Network with Dr. Roberto Rocco at TU Delft. So without further ado, Russell, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit of what we've been trying to accomplish in the COVID world. The major, I guess I'll give you a caveat. One, the major part of it was to actually go to Europe to interact and to attend a conference and do some things. Last summer, of course, that didn't happen, so it's been put on hold. But with that, we can still talk a little bit about some of the connections that we have been able to make in the virtual environment and how they've kind of been included and implemented in the classroom. As Allison mentioned, I am professor of geography at Winston-Salem State University and also the faculty lead for a 3-year-old studio called Spatial Justice Studio, which I'll talk about here in a second. And that was kind of pivotal to this grant and the work we're trying to do. The other thing I just want to mention is that I'm going to apologize to the other speakers and everybody else, but prior to this being scheduled, I already, for the Spatial Justice Studio, every year we fund 4 community fellows to work on research projects. And today at 10 starts their exit interviews. to see how their work over the last year has started. So that's one of the reasons. Usually Smith doesn't get to go first in many things, but I appreciate accommodating my schedule so I can be with you. And the goal is hopefully to get back here before it's all over, but no promises depending on how long those discussions with my fellows take. So let me share my screen here and begin kind of the presentation. Yeah, so as Allison was mentioning, the title of the work I was working on and that continue to work on, the project Infusing Spatial Justice into the Urban Geography Curriculum at Winston-Salem State University. A little bit of background. I am the only geographer. We do not have a degree in geography or in urban planning. I've been at Winston-Salem State University for 13 years. Prior to that, I was a practicing urban planner, urban geographer throughout North Carolina, working in the private sector, working for nonprofits and also local and state government. When I came to WSSU, the previous geographer was interested in the flora and fauna of the Caribbean. And I polled a lot of students at the beginning of what kind of classes they would like. I knew what my interests were, what my expertise was. And while they liked visiting the Caribbean, I think that the topics that were covered in previous classes didn't really speak to them. And so I began a process of trying to weave what I thought were things that the students wanted to learn about more. And part of that was technological, so inclusion of a GIS course to give them some computer mapping skills and experience with spatial analysis. And then kind of trying to grow this urban, what we have today is an urban studies minor. In the last year, we've actually expanded that. And now within one of our largest majors at the university, Justice Studies, there's a new concentration that we've started in spatial justice and sustainability. So a student can major in justice studies, but then get a concentration within the spatial aspect of justice. And that's what I'm here to talk a little bit about today. So that hopefully provides you a little background. Of course, WSSU is an HBCU. So we have upwards of 80% of our population on campus African American. We also have I think it's 64% female. So trying to expose these students to the concept of spatial justice and include it then in a curriculum that could provide them with opportunities for additional learning at the master's level, PhD level, and also real job opportunities. And let's see if it'll let me advance my slide. There we go. So the project description, as we talked a little bit about, was to hopefully travel to Europe, meet leaders in the field of spatial justice in order to incorporate European spatial justice themes into a specific course that I teach once a year, urban geography. The reason I say European spatial justice themes, one of the things that I hope to get across today is that this idea of spatial justice, which we'll define here in a moment, actually is place specific. That of course the idea of creating more just geographies is universal, but what are we trying to overcome in the form of injustice that is occurring, especially in urban spaces, might be different in different regional constructs. So we're going to connect with leading spatial justice scholars in Europe, in which this concept is much more embedded already. The EU funds projects on spatial justice. It's more, I don't know if I'd go as far as saying that people on the streets are talking about spatial justice, but it's something that's a much more commonly heard term, especially in the academy. This is true as well from talking to colleagues in South America, whereas in the States, often when I give presentations or mention the term spatial justice, people look at me and as if that's the first time they've heard those two words together in the same sentence. And then, as I've already alluded to, the third bullet point there was to develop this spatial justice and sustainability curriculum at WSSU as part of the largest major we have within the College of Arts, Science, Business, and Economics, CASB, which is a lot easier to say. So what have we been able to do in light of the lack of opportunity to travel? Well, I've been fortunate enough through Zoom meetings and emails and hosting some different events to connect with all these different organizations. There is a spatial justice journal, or Justice Spatiale. I don't speak French, but it's housed in Paris, and they put out a pretty much annually, maybe biannually, journal on issues related to spatial justice, and recently have applied to be on the board for the journal, and hoping to hear back on that soon. Made a great connection with a colleague who was mentioned earlier by Allison, Roberto Rocco at TU Delft, in their spatial planning and strategy. That coming out of that, I'll mention in a minute, has been an initiative that has really helped have worked and had my classes work with Aachen University in Germany in terms of understanding. There was a master's level class there, and I'll talk a little bit about that. Portugal, connecting with the Institute of Social Science. So these are some of the different things that I've been able to plug into through this initiative, even in light of the lack of traveling and meeting face to face. So what are the projects that have come out of this so far? Well, the first one was last spring after COVID hit. We had already planned a spatial justice roundtable discussion that many scholars and European scholars were actually coming to the States and come to DC to attend the Urban Affairs Conference in Washington, DC last April. Of course, it was canceled. So we pivoted, and that group with myself and Roberto Rocco leading that effort, we created a virtual online event that we termed the Spatial Justice Network, that was open to academics, students, researchers from across the world. We held an event, What is Spatial Justice, on June 9th last year, to an international audience. We had over 100 participants, really some leaders in the field. Suzanne Feinstein from Harvard University wrote the book, The Just City. Some other internationally known from London, from Australia. I think we had every continent except Antarctica represented on that call, and spent a day just talking with one another around this idea of what spatial justice is in different contexts, and then came up with kind of a little agenda of moving forward, and also formalized and created a formal network of which Roberto and I run. And we're getting ready to host our second event, if you look at the fourth bullet point there, at the end of this month, where we're actually pivoting to a specific topic, and we're going to have speakers talking about what is the impact of COVID on spatial justice. So many people are talking about the demise of cities because people don't want to live in close proximity and density and fear of the spread of public health issues. We're also going to address those issues, and people maybe don't want to travel by public transit anymore, all those different things. But there's also opportunities with the emptying out of office space in prime locations. Do we have the ability to afford to develop more affordable housing? Can we make neighborhoods more just? So we're trying to tackle the impact of the past year's pandemic on the topic of spatial justice and injustice. So that's the Spatial Justice Network has been one positive thing that has connected me with, and I would say, we probably have 125 or so people that come in and out of that group, and probably 50% are European based. So that has been a great opportunity for me to interact and meet and get to know those people. And I look forward to, if the grant continues to be available, hopefully maybe next summer being there. And I'll mention the future plans here before we finish up. We also hosted Dr. Simone Tulumello. He was a Fulbright fellow here at the University of Memphis from Portugal, from the University of Lisbon. And I met him at a conference, and we continued a conversation. He actually gave a talk on virtually on campus at WSSU on housing policy and spatial justice. And so we've had the ability to have him, as well as a couple other speakers. Last fall, TU Delft hosted the Just City Manifesto, and students from my urban studies course and urban geography courses interacted for a month with international students through 2-hour Zoom calls every Monday in the month of November last fall, where we discussed issues around topics of spatial justice. And then the students actually crafted a manifesto on what they believe were issues and how they could make the city more just. And so I had really great feedback from students because they enjoyed hearing from other students around the globe. It was mostly European because it was centered again in the Netherlands. But a byproduct of that was actually a manifesto, a document, an online document that is out there that includes these reports from students all across the globe. The next steps looking forward is we're hoping to utilize the funding. I'm hoping to use it next summer. Every summer except the last two, TU Delft organizes this summer school where students come from around the world to work on a 2-week-long planning and spatial justice related topic. And I was invited to, when we first started this, to participate in that and to give kind of the American perspective, if you will, the North American perspective on spatial justice to students in that. So the goal is that when that restarts in hopefully the summer of 2022, continue to work with that group and actually attend that and meet people in person and have conversations. We're going to continue to hold events and develop the Spatial Justice Network. And then after, as well as right now, but especially after traveling to Europe, try to incorporate specific activities and themes from the European spatial justice arena into that urban geography course. And this is where I just want to take a minute or two. One of the things that has become evident, and I mentioned at the beginning, is that the idea of spatial justice, or more readily available, the spatial injustices that happen to different peoples in different cities change over space. And so for the students at Winston-Salem State, when I talk about spatial injustice, students talk about, oh, you mean gentrification? Yeah, my neighborhood in DC, we're having people with a lot more wealth that don't look like us moving in, displacing us, raising property values. Or it might be an environmental issue. We're having an environmental injustice issue. We're having lack of public transportation injustice. And most of those are around race and ethnicity. And for the students at Winston-Salem State, that really resonates with them. They really understand. They come from those neighborhoods. They've experienced these spatial injustices. Whereas in Europe, it not necessarily, speaking with scholars there, the race can be part of it, ethnicity can be part of it, but it's definitely more, and this is still, again, related to experience in American cities, but income inequality. And recently, in the last couple of years, the influx of migration. And what does that mean for cities in terms of spatial justice? So we're trying to incorporate and cover all those different ways of understanding spatial injustice in different contexts and explain those to students so that they can then hopefully in the future lead us to a place where we see more just geographies, that we have more access, inclusivity, and opportunity for all peoples in urban environments. So that, I don't know if that was all my time, if I went over or not, but I'm really appreciative of the opportunity. I want to thank Allison. I want to thank CES for this chance. I had been previously, I guess I should mention, previously funded by the Asian Center. So this work continues, and I don't know if since I'm having to go, if there's time for a question or two, if someone has one, because I won't be around, I guess, when you open it up. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Russell. That was really interesting. Yeah, you're right on time. We have about 1 minute, so if anyone has anything for Russell right now, we could probably take one question. If not, we'll keep moving. But thank you so much for sharing all that with us. That was really interesting, and good luck with your meeting, and we hope you can join us at the end.
Thank you. Thanks. Good to see everybody. Thanks.
All right. So we are going to move on to our next speaker. That is Matthew Cook. He studies history and anthropology as professor of post-colonial and South Asian studies at North Carolina Central University. His research focuses on colonial and post-colonial South Asia, and he is currently the president of the American Institute for Pakistan Studies. He has collaborated with the Carolina Asian Center on the Southeast Conference of the Association for Asian Studies and on exchange projects for visiting South Asian delegations. So with that said, Matthew, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Hi, Allison. Thank you for everyone for being here today. I know it's yet another Zoom meeting for everyone, and I appreciate your time and willingness to spend Zoom with us this morning. So I have a couple of different hats that I wear, and that'll be evident in my presentation today. I'll keep it short, 7 to 10 minutes, as I was asked to do. And hopefully, usually the joys of having Cook means I don't come after Russell in presentations, but we'll be a little more low tech today than Russell. So as was mentioned, one of my hats is as a professor at NC Central University. And I was sort of specifically brought on at NCCU, I guess a dozen or 13 or so years ago, to sort of think about how to globalize the curriculum at that campus with a specific emphasis on South Asia. And part of what I have been doing over the years there is building the sort of global studies curriculum in various different ways and developing the global studies certificate program and degree program. The other sort of hat that I wear, of course, as was mentioned, is my American Institute of Pakistan Studies hat. The American Institute of Pakistan Studies is one of, I believe, 24 members of the Council of American Overseas Research Institutes or Centers, KORC. And so a lot of what I've been doing in the last 5 or 6 years have been sort of wearing both those hats simultaneously with a large amount of assistance, both from the Carolina Asia Center and occasionally from Duke. So unlike, Russell's presentation, I'm going to sort of historically walk through some of the things that we've been doing, particularly since the last time we had this similar meeting a few years ago. And a lot of what we've been doing on our campus in conjunction with the American Institute of Pakistan Studies has really been about connecting people across borders with an attempt to have those connections develop into curriculum specific items. So this sort of move to try and connect people, particularly as it relates to Pakistan, has all kinds of different moving parts usually. Security issues are part of these equations also, which sometimes make those challenging. So like so many of us, a lot of our programming that's actually specific to community colleges and MSIs is sort of on ice at the moment. We're waiting to thaw out, hopefully sooner than later. But AIPS and NCCU's sort of combination and partnerships with regarding to promoting, people-to-people interactions go back probably at least 7, 8 years. Again, I think the core of any university, apologies to all the university administrators in the room, really are the faculty and the students. So a lot of what we've been doing is focusing on developing these kinds of personal one-on-one interactions and opportunities for faculty in conjunction with bringing students into that equation at a later point. So these people-to-people interactions really started with bringing junior faculty from Pakistan to North Carolina. There was a US Embassy grant that AIPS, the American Institute of Pakistan Studies, had to help facilitate this. And so this process started, must have been back in 2014, actually, where we were able to, in fact, with assistance in the first stance from Duke, to bring junior faculty for mentoring here to the United States for an entire semester and financially support them from the American Institute of Pakistan Studies. Now, there's always two equations to developing these kinds of people-to-people interactions. And that is, not only is there a money equation, but there's also the actually administrative support that goes with bringing someone. And that's really where both the Carolina Asia Center and our friends at Duke have been helpful. So in the first instance, when we brought Shazia Aziz from Lahore, from ComSat, she was actually housed as a visiting scholar at Duke in conjunction with NCCU. And that provided a support mechanism and structure, which isn't as well established, if you will, at Central, and enabled us to do things with her, technical things often, that were not necessarily as easy to do on our own. So that partnership was particularly important and key for bringing Shazia. And then subsequently, the Carolina Asia Center sponsored a similar semester-long sort of residency for Aqsa Ijaz. And she was associated with the Carolina Asia Center and spent an entire semester in North Carolina, interacting both with faculty, but also with students. I mean, she had the opportunity to sit in on courses and things of that sort, but a lot of the interactions in terms of the mentoring of junior faculty from Pakistan, had to do with developing those person-to-person interactions between the junior faculty and more established faculty here in the United States. Now that of course is a two-way road, right? So what ends up happening is that those experiences of those junior faculty are taken back to Pakistan and make their way into the curriculum. But also it works the other way. And I've seen this specifically with other programs that we've run, and I'll talk about those in a minute, where those experiences then get built in, those person-to-person interactions get built into the sort of curriculum and activities that are associated with teaching courses and interactions of students here in the United States. I think the other thing that's similar, it was funded under the same grant, in fact, but it was much more elaborate, was a digital humanities exchange program that we did with Pakistan, that the Carolina Asia Center, again, served as sort of the administrative touchstone for the program, and without its assistance wouldn't have been able to put together as easily. And in this particular program, what we did, and I'll share a link, we made a video of it. I'm not sure if I shared it with the Carolina Asia Center, but they can take a gander at it and see. In this particular program, we brought not one person over for a semester, but we actually brought 5 over for a month. And it was sort of the second part of our sort of idea about how to bring, and expose U.S. faculty to Pakistanis in Pakistan, but I'll get to that in a minute or two. And so this was a really, I think, successful program. And what happened was these individuals, they came over from various universities in Pakistan, all across Pakistan, to the United States for this month. They attended a digital humanities seminar. They attended courses that faculty at NCCU were teaching. They had extensive interactions with our students as well as our faculty. And in part, that was because what we did was we actually set each one of them up with an academic mentor that came from Central. And so each one of those people were responsible for sort of taking one of those junior faculty under their wing and mentoring them. And then they involved them within the courses that they were teaching over the summer, and allowed them and gave them great opportunities to interact with students themselves. So again, a lot of our sort of person-to-person efforts have been sort of tracked through faculty as a way to develop student exposure to Pakistan and Pakistanis. Now, in addition, there's other things that have been supported. We have done more academic, less sort of person-to-person events, Pakistan studies seminars and workshops and things like that that have been hosted at NCCU, which has been more about developing relationships and person-to-person interactions in the Pakistan studies community here in the United States. Now, the other side of the equation in terms of developing people-to-people interactions that we've been active with actually have to deal with bringing faculty from the United States, particularly from MSIs and HBCUs, to Pakistan. Now, bringing Pakistanis to the United States to interact with our students is much easier than the other way around, which is bringing bringing American students to Pakistan. And that's something that, AIPS has been very successful at doing at the graduate student level. We have a joint program with Berkeley, which is a semester-long residence program in Lahore for training students in Urdu. But for a whole variety of other issues and reasons, it's difficult to bring students. So the way that we've been doing this is we've been working very hard to bring faculty to Pakistan so that they can have those interactions, those person-to-person interactions and firsthand experiences, and then bring them back and have them integrated into questions and ideas and thoughts in their classrooms. In some cases, this has been much more directly focused on curriculum development. So for example, AIPS in coordination with CAORC, the Council of American Overseas Research Programs, has a 2-week program. It sounds similar to the one that was mentioned about Brussels earlier, where we take faculty from both CCI, community college, and MSI institutions to Lahore to look at issues of urban history and urban development within Pakistan. And that's specifically a curriculum professional development opportunity. So they work on ways of integrating what it is that they're learning in site and in place, mostly in Lahore, but they do go to Islamabad and other places around northern Pakistan to develop, if you will, how to put those experiences, as I said, and integrate them into their curriculum. And they actually have curriculum development sort of exercises that they do as part of that experience. And that's been wildly popular in terms of the feedback that we've gotten. Now, unfortunately, our second year of doing that was put on ice because of COVID. But we intend to still run it. And I know that I've had a number of faculty who were involved in the Digital Humanities Exchange who are now interested in going to Pakistan and developing their own person-to-person interactions. So that's one sort of way that we've been going about, if you will, developing those people-to-people interactions. We also, have funded, as I said before, digital humanities exchanges. Those exchanges not only come to the United States, as I discussed earlier, but they also go the other way. And I know that we've taken, HBCU, particularly NCCU faculty, to Pakistan to run digital humanities seminars and give them those kinds of first-person interactions that are so important, I think. Particularly as it relates to Pakistan, where there are many, dated and outdated, I should say, and misconceived ideas about the country and its people. And this has also been helpful for our colleagues in Pakistan, because they equally, by the way, have often interesting ideas about the United States. So it's always a two-way movement always when I'm thinking about these things is how can we better develop person-to-person interactions so that we develop in the United States, both our faculty and our students, better ideas about Pakistan and maybe South Asia as general, but also the other way around. How can we do things that develop or encourage people to develop better ideas and concepts of the United States? And I'll just give you sort of an example here, and I'll just end on this. For example, right now we're involved in helping develop Quaid-e-Azam University in Islamabad, set up and develop an American Studies conference. And at this conference, we are actively involving HBCU faculty to give presentations in areas that maybe folks are not as familiar with in Pakistan in terms of the United States. So a lot of what we've been sort of up to at NCCU specifically, and amongst community colleges and MSIs more generally as it relates to AIPS, is really about developing these people-to-people interactions. And with the idea that those will sort of percolate down into curriculum and classroom, if you will, lessons. But those have also allowed us to develop interactions at the student level between junior Pakistani faculty and others. And they've paid forward. So for example, a lot of the DH folks who we trained and had those interactions with, they've established their own digital humanities workshops and seminars at which, we go and give presentations to their students virtually. So this has been, I think, very successful on a lot of different levels. And to be honest, the administrative support structure that the Carolina Asia Center and occasionally Duke has been able to provide has really made a lot of these people-to-people interactions possible. And without those assistance, it would have been much more difficult to sort of pull off. So that's essentially what we've been up to on our side of North Carolina. I'm not sure what time or how much time I have left. We have time for Q&A, I think, afterwards. So I think maybe I should just hand it over to Rose.
Yeah, no, no worries. Thank you so much for your presentation, Matthew. You guys are doing perfect on time today. Thank you so much. And yes, like Matthew mentioned, we will have a Q&A for this session right after Rose's presentation. But without further ado, we will go ahead and move on to Rose Sakifew. Professor Rose Sakifew is an associate professor of English at Winston-Salem State University. Her area of specialization and scholarly activities is interdisciplinary and includes the literature of African and African American women, women's studies, cultural and diaspora studies, and recently South Asian women's writing. Professor Sakifew is a graduate of Hunter College, CUNY, and Ahmadu Bello University, where she received her PhD. Rose, I'll turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would like to, first of all, thank the organizers of this event. It's a wonderful opportunity for faculty to share, to exchange ideas. In the beginning, when you asked about our affiliation, my work is, I've been sponsored actually by both the Carolina Asia Center and the African Studies Institute. And so that in the way that I present today, there is a kind of overlap. The second thing I want to say is that because of the dual sponsorship, I'm concentrating not just on how I've integrated global content into my classrooms, my teaching strategies and so on, but how it has, my sponsorship has also enhanced my professional development. I hope that I don't go over, because I had kind of prepared a longer presentation, but here we are. So making connections across borders. So again, I'm going to speak about global content in my classrooms as a result of scholarship, as well as my professional development, my research and my scholarship. So these are the two courses that I teach at Winston-Salem State. I created these courses in 2010. Our university was expanding our curriculum. And this first course it's a world lit course, Women's Writing in a Global Context. And in that course, we look at cross-cultural experiences of women as expressed in their writing. So selected, I changed the regions of the world that I look at, but in recent years, I've been looking at literature from Asia, Africa, and the Islamic world. And then the other course that I'm going to talk about is a course called Black Women's Identity. And that course deals with African and African diaspora women. The first half of that course looks at pre-colonial African women. And then it comes forward in time to the period of enslavement and the traumatic transformation of African identity or African women's identity. So again, the evolution of Black women's identity from pre-colonial Africa to the formation of the African diaspora, looking at social, economic, religious, and political roles. And this is basically what I do in terms of my research and scholarship, which was already shared with you. Yeah, the literature of African and African diaspora women, women's studies, cultural studies, diaspora, and migration, which is the focus of much of my research and scholarship. So the first of these, I'm kind of going backwards in time. This conference, I was sponsored by the African Studies Center, and I'm a member of the Ghana Studies Council. So the conference theme, Ghana as Center, and which is perfect for well, what I'm about to share concerning Ghana in the classroom. I presented a paper called Memory, Identity, and Return in a recent book by a young Ghanaian writer, a critically acclaimed book called Homegoing. And this work, I don't teach the whole book, but let me not preempt myself. I teach one chapter from this book in my Black Women's Identity course. The novel is a work of historical fiction that narrates the experiences of Ghanaian and diaspora people whose lives are shaped by the legacy of enslavement, displacement, and fractured cultural heritage. So what she does in this text is that it profiles the descendants of two half-sisters in Ghana. One of them remains in Ghana and becomes the wife of a slave master, and the other one gets sold into slavery and ends up on a plantation in Alabama. And the book traces the lineage of these two half-sisters. So this is an image of Ghana. This was our conference. And this is the University of Ghana at Legon in Accra. This is the text with the author. It is called Homegoing. And because I told you that I'm kind of combining scholarship outcomes along with the classroom or the curriculum development, I have published a chapter of the same paper that I presented. So in terms of introducing Ghana in the classroom, I give a huge profile, country profile. This is a PowerPoint where we look at the map of Ghana, the population, the languages, a little bit about the culture to introduce students. I have a number of introductory, my goodness, ways that I introduce this country. Ghana has a long association with the diaspora. Ghana is the first African nation to gain independence from Britain, 1957. And Kwame Nkrumah, even back then, invited the diaspora to return to Ghana. And because of it, presently in Ghana, the African American Association of Ghana, I have a YouTube on them. I'm actually a member of it. I have another recent one, Why African Americans Are Moving to Ghana. And what is even more exciting is that 2019, 400 years after the first Africans arrived in Jamestown, Virginia, Ghana declared 2019 the year of return. The president of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, invited the diaspora back. So to make a long story short, all during 2019, many African diaspora people were in Ghana. And I have footage of much of this. I also show a documentary that I made in Ghana in 2012 called Building Bridges, about African Americans in Ghana, and to debunk the stereotypes about Africa. There's a very powerful YouTube that I show called The Africa They Never Show You. And it's a very excellent introduction because it shows modern infrastructure in all over Africa. So I use that. I also have a PowerPoint on Ghanaian women. So when I teach I have this is called NES. In this same course, I teach this chapter. And what is exciting about this is that in YouTube, Giassi actually reads the story. And it's probably one of the most compelling chapters in the book. So I use this story. It's a story of a Ghanaian woman on a plantation and how she tries to escape, how she escapes. So because in this course, we look at slavery, this particular chapter, it discusses slavery, African Ghanaian women's identity, Ghana and the slave trade, women's exploitation during enslavement, memory and cultural retention, and the formation of the African diaspora. And very excitingly, the chapter on this book, I published it in a publication that came out like a few weeks ago that I edited. It's on homegoing. I was sponsored again for this trip and the subsequent presentation. that I integrated into my course. This is another one concerning the writing course, women's writing in a global context. And the way that I introduce global content in this course, first of all, this course is about women's writing cross-culturally. So to open, I have, we look at India, literature from Indian writers, Indian Dalit women, African women writers, Muslim women, and so on, and others. So what I do is, like, for example, if we're looking at India, I have a PowerPoint that profiles India. I have one that I use in the beginning of the course called Globalizing Gender Across Cultures, presentations of women from that particular country. I introduced the writer and then the authors. For most of the authors in my course, they are on YouTube speaking about their lives, their work, and so on. And this one is very, very important. Actually, I use this one. It's very popular, very well known. Adichie, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's The Danger of a Single Story, because that YouTube, it's about a 20-minute YouTube. It is used in academia across disciplines. And she talks about the danger of stereotypes, monolithic images of people, places, cultures. So that's, I use this perhaps maybe on the second day of class. The themes in this course, we're looking at women's identity, norms, customs, feminist elements, patriarchy, political resistance, tradition, and modernity. Those are the basic themes in the course. And to continue, oh, well, I'm sorry, I left out something before I go on. Let me give you an example of like when I look at Indian women's literature, I have two selections from Dalit, the lowest caste system in India, and I connect the status of the Dalit caste with the status of African Americans and the legacy of enslavement and oppression. So I have PowerPoint presentations on Dalit communities, especially I also look at the African descended communities in South India, the Sidi people. So moving forward, how much time do I have?
You've got about 3 minutes left.
Oh, that's not good. Not good. This is another sponsored trip early when well, this is from 2015 when I went to Yunnan Minzu University in Kunming. And there sorry, let me go back. I began to research Chinese women's writing, which is the basis of some of the Chinese literature that is also in the women's writing course. I was there for only a short time. This is, that trip was sponsored by the Carolina Asia Center. Another one is September 18. I presented a paper called African Women in China. And because I'm running out of time, I'm going to go through this very quickly. Women's status as diaspora subjects. Then, yeah, this was the sponsored by the International Institute, the Conference for Asian Studies, of which I'm a member. This is conference sites, research goals. I eventually turned that presentation into a research project that was upended by COVID. So I'm coming to the end, I'm almost done. I did one more presentation sponsored by the African Studies Center in 2018. And this one was China related, Africa and China. This was in Abuja, the capital of Nigeria. This is at the conference, Africans in China, Race, Identity, and Culture. So basically what I did was that I developed a research project because studying, researching African women in China, it is under-researched. Most of the research in my migration studies concentrates on men. So in subsequent visits to Guangzhou, These are students that I met. This is a research project. I did not continue it because COVID shut it down. These are some of the students that I met at Jinan University in Guangzhou. And outcomes, my work fulfills the WSSU strategic plan for global awareness and global citizenship, the professional scholarship research part, professional development, networking, publications, the research trajectory that I'm hoping I will resume after COVID goes away and I can reconnect with my participants and expand and complete the research. This is the last one, I'm finishing. These organizations, the International Institute for Asian Studies, International Council for Asian Studies, the China-Africa Research Network has grown out of this Africa-Asia focus. And I would like to thank you all very much. I hope I didn't go 2 minutes maybe over.
You did perfectly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes now for Q&A for anyone. I know Russell's not here, so we've got Matthew and Rose. So anyone who wants to ask questions about their presentations, we can also talk to you if you have questions about, maybe how to fit what you want to do with this kind of theme. We'll open up the chat for that now.
I just might add something here.
Sure.
And that is because I'm a Pakistaniist, although I spent the first half of my career in doing work in India. Most of what I talked about, of course, were things that we're involved with Pakistan. But we're also fortunate to have not only the president of AIPS here in North Carolina, but we're also fortunate to have the American Institute of Indian Studies president here in North Carolina too, Sumati Ramaswamy at Duke. So if there are individuals who are interested in tying up with an overseas research center like AIPS, but is interested in topics and issues having to do with India, we have resources, or there are resources and key personnel here in North Carolina already that they could potentially sort of reach out to. AWS is housed in Chicago, but as I said, the current president is here in North Carolina. So there are opportunities, I would imagine, for people who are interested in traveling, not necessarily to Pakistan, but for India. And in fact, I know they exist. They too have a kind of similar seminar like our Lahore seminar that we do with KORC, that's focused on a different theme associated with India. So when COVID permits all of these programs to be thought out and people to return back to South Asia, there are opportunities also to have that kind of develop those kinds of person-to-person connections that I was talking about on the other side of the border in India also.
Thanks for sharing that, Matthew. We have a question here from Kevin. At what stage in y'all's overseas connections do you reach out to the area study centers support, so our centers here, UNC Duke, at the earliest planning phase to help build ideas of what is possible, or once you already have your plan and need to figure out what support is possible? Like, at what point would you reach out?
Rose, do you want to?
Yes, well, actually, from time to time, or pretty much every year, the centers will, for the networks in my university, will send like what would I call it? A call for submissions. And then we, if we have a project or a trip, a conference, whatever it is, then we write like a formal application. And then I think there's like, and in that application, we specify the goals, the objectives, the budget, and the outcome, how it will benefit the university and students. And we submit it as a formal application. And then we wait and hope that we are successful. And I should add, I'm deeply grateful. I have received a number of grants. Not all of them are in my presentation. There are others as well down through the years, but it's an invaluable opportunity. Yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
I usually reach out to the Carolina Asia Center and to other AIPS member institutions. Usually for these kinds of, in relationship to these kinds of programs, when I have some funding that's actually in place. I know that, you know, we can always come and ask for assistance from the Carolina Asia Center. They've been extremely generous. And I know part of the goal is to serve North Carolina as a Asia Center for all of North Carolina, being the Carolina Asia Center, not just the UNC Asia Center. And so they've been very helpful providing various forms of financial support for smaller things, which have been really, really helpful because they've actually enabled some of these larger projects to get off the ground. But I usually reach out for assistance and partnership when I have a sort of plan and kind of in place, and I have resources that I can bring with me. Moving forward, and maybe this is something for the future, at least at AIPS, you know, we've been thinking about how we might go after opportunities, particularly grant opportunities, in which various campus or university members of our organization can then serve as subcontractors in certain ways on our grants, in ways that we can't do ourselves. So, you know, moving forward, FYI, fair warning to our friends at the Carolina Asia Center and elsewhere, I might be reaching out with you for specific ideas about how to actually work with us to promote not only, you know, Asian studies at North Carolina Central, but also in much sort of broader ways as we move forward. So that's where I stand in terms of where I've traditionally sort of reached out for contacts and develop relationships with the Carolina Asia Center, as well as with Duke when there's been things in place. They haven't been settled, but there are things there's a plan in place that I can pitch to them. And also frequently funding that I have in place that's already there. As opposed to going directly to them and asking them to say, hey, can you fund, you know, $80,000 for a DH program or something like that, you know? So this is, I think, you know, a place where I've started, but I think there are ways that maybe more directly that the Carolina Asia Center and perhaps the Duke Center can actually collaborate with the various American overseas research centers, maybe a little more directly as a member.
Absolutely. And that's interesting to hear y'all's perspective. Beatrice, I see you have your hand up if you want to weigh in here.
I don't want to interrupt you, Allison. Did you have something else that you needed?
I was just going to say from the center perspective, I hope I speak for everyone I say this, maybe it's a little different, but we're also happy to help you at any stage. You know, if you have a plan and you have a conference, great. Sometimes we have conferences we recommend to people. So, you know, from our point of view, we can help at any stage, you know, in your planning if you're trying to incorporate new things into your curriculum.
I was just wondering about the growth of global capacity on your campuses. I know that, you know, COVID has hit everybody hard, and I am really impressed by the efforts and the projects that are ongoing and have also learned how to shift during the COVID period. But I'm wondering about where you see global capacity on your campus heading at this point.
Rose?
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know.
That sounds like a question for an administrator. I'm not sure I can speak to that in a way that is a reflection of my my administrators. That's not easy.
I'll also just sort of, I'll do a dodge, but also try to answer it too. And I'm no administrator, really. But what I can say is that there's interest and demand. And so if there's opportunities and resources for it, there will be people who show and want. This has been one of the interesting things that I found with regard to Pakistan is, once you open the door, people get interested. And now I have faculty knocking on my virtual door all the time saying, what's going on? Is this an opportunity? Can I follow? Can I go on that seminar? How do I do it? Right. And so that in conjunction with, the interactions and demand, if you will, for courses that I teach in either world history or global studies, which are always full, would indicate to me that there is in fact a demand and interest, or an interest both on the part of the faculty, which is where a lot of my focus has been, but also on the part of students when they're able to sort of develop or get access to individuals that are above and beyond, the traditional missions of some of the CCIs as well as MSI institutions. So the demand is there on both the faculty and student side. The question then becomes an issue of what kind of resources can be put into play by our campuses in order to satisfy that interest when there are so many other demands on resources and interests on our campuses. And the question becomes a administrative call, as Rose said, that we don't usually make as faculty about where those kinds of limited resources are best spent.
Sounds familiar.
So we're right
Thank
about,
you so much for attempting to answer that question.
I thank you too.
we're right about at 10 minutes for this Q&A. So for the sake of time, I think we'll go ahead and wrap up this session. I see we have something from Shannon, and then I have a question from Donna, but they seem to fit well for a greater Q&A. So I'll make sure Kevin has those when he gets that going at the end. I apologize for my cat meowing in the background. He's very excited. I want to thank Matthew and Rose, and I know Russell left, but I want to thank you both very much for presenting right now. And it was very interesting to hear about your work, and we hope to continue to work with you. I know we will throughout the coming semesters. Sorry, here's my cat. And yeah, we'll go ahead and wrap up and have a 5-minute break, and then we will get started with our second session.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Back. Thank you so much to our panelists from the first session. We are so thankful for your time and for sharing your expertise. My name is Corinne Zaragoza. I am the outreach coordinator of the UNC Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies. And I'm very excited today to be moderating our second panel, which is tailoring the global to fit your local. In this session, we'll be looking at different ways that community college and MSI faculty have looked at the student body population at their institutions, have looked at the students in their classrooms, and have kind of tailored the global curriculum integration to fit the needs and the interests of their students. I'm very honored to be introducing the panelist that we have today, whose work I greatly admire. Our first is Shannon Hahn. She is the chair of foreign languages and a Spanish instructor at Durham Technical Community College. She has worked closely with various UNC and Duke area study centers since 2015 to enhance global curriculum across campus, supporting faculty with content development and with organizing events. She is also coordinator of the Global Distinction Program and works with students interested in developing global competence. I will hand it off to Shannon. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm realizing this camera has it's not showing up very well, but I'll start my screen and then it will matter, right? I'm glad to be here. Again, I'm from Durham Technical Community College, and we are a very diverse college in Durham, if you don't know much about our area. But as Corinne was mentioning, we really are trying to find things in buildings that work with our student population. And I'm working on sharing as I get started here. And so my presentation is a little different than the ones you've seen before, because I'm not just looking at work I've done in my classes, but also just in general what Durham Tech has done with the various area centers really since 2015 is when we got started. So I wanted to go briefly through the kind of the stages of development, or the timeline that we've gone through, and then what kind of ongoing collaboration we've had with various centers, what curriculum enhancements faculty have done. And I'll give you examples of what has been done on campus, and then just some of the outcomes that we've seen. So first of all, I know this slide has a lot of writing on it, but the point is just kind of the general evolution that we've seen in our work with the area centers over the last several years. So in fall 2015, we were actually approached by the Center for Middle East and Islamic Studies, who noticed that we had an Arabic program, and they were interested in working with us to try to develop that more. And we've actually taught Arabic for over 15 years. I mean, it's just been this, it started and was just this very small program that we were trying to just hold on to. And really the support from that center has helped us keep that program. And we've seen some very interesting developments in it over the past year that I'll discuss as we go along. But that got us started. So where we started with that is they wanted to support Arabic. And then we talked about ways to bring speaker events to campus. And so really our initial foray into a lot of this had to do with bringing events to campus and having speakers come. We had speakers start coming in spring 2016 with the Middle East and Islamic Studies Center. And then you'll see kind of the progression here that we then started talking with the Carolina Asia Center and had speakers come from there. We've worked with the Center for Global Initiatives, and then later with African Studies Center, and then the most recent events and collaborations that we've had have been with the Consortium in Latin American Caribbean Studies. I don't want it to look like we haven't worked with European studies, because we have. Our faculty have participated in programs such as the EU to U programs, EU in North Carolina, those sorts of things. So we've really, in the end, we've worked with everyone on the list. And so these collaborations and networks that have been created have just touched our campus in so many different ways, and had such an impact on some of the courses and the faculty, and then our students. So just to, wanted you to see kind of the general overview of how we've evolved through that. Our initial, what you're seeing here is the flyer from the Asian Exploration Series, which was one of our more, what's the word, not obvious, but one of our more high profile events that we did in spring of 2018. We did is kind of our kickoff to working with the Carolina Asia Center, where we had a series of events that were, they're public events, but tied to the World Civilizations 2 course. And I'll explain a little more about that later. But we've tried to do a combination of speaker events and then connected speaker series, and then the Mideast Cultural Festival that we've done. And then we also worked with the Latin American Film Festival to bring one of the showings to our campus in fall of 2019. So in all this work with the various area centers, we have worked most closely, as far as more formally, let me say, not closely, more formally, with the Mideast and Islamic Studies Center and the Carolina Asia Center. And for those two centers, we have actually been part of their most recent Title VI funding through the Department of Education. And we have basically two areas of collaboration. So there's funding support, and then there's professional support. The funding support, you'll recognize these, pretty much all of these bullet points from what Emma said at the beginning of the presentation, of the different types of support that are available from the area centers. So what we've done for both Middle East and Asia studies, is we have used funding from the centers to really increase our library and instructional materials. Before this project existed, we did it when we started the projects. We did basically a survey of what library materials we had and found that we had nothing. They were very old. Remember when we looked at the Asian studies related materials, for example, like we had nothing on Southeast Asia. The only book we had on Vietnam was something written in the 60s that was really kind of scary. And so we've been able to use those resources to get access to more resources for our students. We have used curriculum development grants for our faculty to work on modules in their own courses, and I'll show you what's been done there. We've had faculty travel to conferences and other professional development support for faculty. We've had someone have actually now two attend the Association for Asian Studies. We've funded someone to attend the Middle East Studies Association conference. There's funding has been used for the ACTFL conference. So especially coming from the community college, I don't have institutional funds to fund these types of things. So it's really been impactful for faculty that we can offer them a chance to go to an area studies conference or language studies conference that we would not normally be able to send them to. And then the other aspect is that we've used salary support for mainly for our Arabic program. So they're able to subsidize our salary so that we can continue to run that class. We don't have to worry about the enrollment as much. Now our enrollment is high enough that that's not really an issue anyway, except in the intermediate level, we may not have enough that if we didn't have the support, we might not be able to run the course, but we're able to. We've also been able to run the Mideast Cultures class as a Humanities 120 for those in the community college system that we would not have been able to do otherwise. So those funding supports have been transformational in many ways. The professional support, we've had a series of speakers and events. Obviously, those have kind of been on hold right now, but we're looking forward to getting back to that. And we have gotten research support. For instance, the Asia Studies Center and Latin American Korean Studies consortiums have given me access to the libraries to continue research that I've been working on. And then the networking has been, I would say, one of the most, probably the most lasting aspect in some ways. We've been able to connect with other centers, other scholarly networks that we would not have had access to before, just from our connections with the area centers, because they're a great way to, you can call them and say, I want to do this. Who do you know that can help me? And they will know someone. And so the networking is very important. One good example of that is we were taking students to Washington, D.C. several years ago now. And I wanted the global distinction students who were on that trip to have a special event while we were there that would really get them some sort of true global education experience. And so connections through, at that point, the Carolina Asia Center set us up with a visit to the Migration Policy Institute. And so our students were able to meet with a researcher there and learn what they do and what life as an academic and researcher, not in an institute like a university, what that means. What does policy research mean? So that was just an example of some of those networking supports. We have seen, there's a lot of courses listed here. The courses on the top are courses that have been funded directly from either the Asia Center or the Mideast Studies Center. Obviously, our Arabic language courses have used the funding, not just for salary support, but also in curriculum development. Noor Ghazi, our instructor for Arabic, has used funding to for the purpose of transitioning everything to online. And most exciting, the thing that we're most excited about right now is that she this semester did a COIL project, which is a collaborative online international learning project that was supported by the UNC Center to connect our students in the Humanities 120 Mideast Cultures class to students at the University of Mosul in Iraq. And I was able to go to their virtual meeting back at the end of March, or no, it was in April. But they met online, and we had about 50 people online at once talking about the life under ISIS in Mosul, how ISIS came to be, and what they see as the as where we're going from here. And so it was really interesting that our students were able to ask questions of some of the professors and the students in Mosul, and had a really good conversation about that. In our History 112, the instructor there, this is the one that started with that Asian exploration series, the kickoff. What we did was took various points in that world history class that connected very closely to Asia, which is a decent amount of it. So we created, we had speakers come to campus that we also recorded. So throughout that semester, there was a series of 4 speakers that connected with the World Civilizations class. And that class is taught in person and online. And so we're able to use those recordings. We've kept the recordings, and Dr. Peterson continues to use those in her classes so that her classes have a stronger connection to the Asian content than they would have otherwise. So having the expert speakers and the kind of the bang for your buck, that we're able to continue to use those resources semester after semester. Dr. Moldoff has added in the Intro to Film Studies class a whole unit on Japanese film. That was not something that he was, in both cases here, Dr. Peterson and Dr. Moldoff, these were not their strong suits. But having the curriculum development gave them a chance to really explore something they weren't as familiar with and bring something of interest to their students. And so he added a section on Japanese film. What I've done in Spanish, which is labeled as Spanish, the first semester Spanish here, but honestly, by now the content has kind of spread out through many of the levels of Spanish, is I looked at the Asian Latino experience and the process of migration from particularly East Asia to Latin America and basically the late 1800s, and what that has meant for Latin America since. And so I actually initially was funded by as a curriculum development grant, the College Educators Research Fellowship, which I believe someone else is also going to talk about, was my initial funding for that. But I've also had support from the Asia Center. So it kind of, crosses the 2 areas. So, I work with both sides on that. But these are ones that we've been able to specifically fund from our funding. The others on the bottom, excuse me, are courses that have been enhanced with some kind of global content, mostly funded by Worldview, because Worldview does also offer curriculum development grants each year. So most of those are funded by Worldview. Some of them are just faculty who did not get any funding. They just were interested and they did it anyway. So we do have a lot of interest on our campus. Right now it's kind of waning because everyone's, just trying to survive teaching online, and they're not really looking as much toward that. But I am starting to get more inquiries and people interested, kind of starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel for COVID. Real quick, I think I only have less than a minute, but what this has really done for us is increased visibility for area studies, obviously. It's strengthened collaboration among the institutions. We have many more collaborations with Duke than we had before, and we're right next door to Duke, if you're not aware. And so we have more collaborations with them than we had before because of the connections that we've been able to make. Someone knows someone is the networking. Faculty have been able to research areas that they are interested in, something new. And the last point I wanted to make very quickly is that we have looked at the difference between enhancing current courses versus offering new courses. And in the community college, we don't have a lot of opportunity to offer new courses. We're kind of prescriptive in the courses that we have that are available to us. So what we have found that we try to do more of enhancing current courses so that we get more, we have more impact on the campus in general. If we can enhance a world history class that a number of students are going to take for their general ed, then we're going to touch more students than a specific area studies course, for example. So those are my main points, and it's kind of all over the place because we are all over the place, and we've tried to take advantage of as much as we could from the different area centers, and look forward to continuing that.
Thank you so much, Shannon. You're right. Durham Tech has done so much with all of our different centers, and so we're very pleased that you're able to share your insights with us today. So thank you so much. We are going to move on to our second panelist, Dr. Sharon Roberts. Dr. Sharon Roberts is a native of Trinidad and an associate professor of mass communication at Xavier University of Louisiana. She researches journalism practices in the Caribbean, Caribbean media systems, and Caribbean media discourse. In 2019, Dr. Roberts was awarded a College Educators Research Fellowship from us at the UNC Duke Consortium in Latin American and Caribbean Studies to further her research on Haiti. She's going to share with us the wonderful ways and she tailors the study of Latin America for her students at Xavier.
Thank you, Corinne. So I'm going to sort of wake you guys up the way I actually wake my students up. So if you will indulge me a little bit with some sonic introduction to my approaches, how about I humor you a little bit? So I teach at a historically Black university in New Orleans. And the first thing I do when I begin to teach Latin America and the Caribbean to my students is I say, what are your connections? They're like usually maybe one or two students has something that they can think about. So then I say, what's in your playlist? And then I get an interesting wave of trap music all the way to pop music. So then I say, all right, someone pull up their favorite trap song, and then I play a little bit of Fetty Wap for them.
1738. I'm like, hey, what's up? Hello. Since you're pretty.
And then after that, I say, that sounds really familiar to something in another. Then I say someone who actually has done this in the past. They love this song by Meghan Trainor, the pop singer. And I just play a little bit of the opening to this tune. And then I give them a little taste of Marshall and Destra in Trinidad. So I start off my class with the sonic comparisons between Latin American and Caribbean sound and the sounds that are on their playlist as a way of beginning to engage my students on similarities sonically and connect them to this particular course that I'm teaching. So let me sort of back up a little bit and sort of share a little bit how introducing my students to Latin America and the Caribbean works. So hold on one second. Right. So here at Xavier, we don't have an area studies undergraduate program, but what we do is we have this scaffolded approach to teaching Latin America and the Caribbean across many of our courses. And so what I'm going to share with you is there are several courses that I teach, and there are several that other colleagues and I teach in which I'm able to introduce some of the resources from the UNC and Duke centers into my courses. So with this first sonic introduction, I have up here this visual spatial comparison between New Orleans and Jacmel, Haiti, which is one of the ways that I start to begin to say there's a lot more that we share in common. So when I started off, I hooked them in with this sort of sonic comparisons between what they listen to and what they consider to be African American sound or even American popular culture sound, and contrast that to our Caribbean sound. And so, because I mostly teach African American students, I ask them who some of their favorite rappers are. And then I show them this list on the right here that you guys can see. We have Biggie has Jamaican parents, Busta Rhymes has Jamaican parents, and I go down this whole list of all of their favorite rappers. And then I say, who are the most important female rappers right now that you think of as being Black? And obviously, the first two names that come to mind are Cardi B and Nicki Minaj. And then I say to my students, what are their connections to the Caribbean? And they're not sure. And then I go to this image and I said, Nicki Minaj was born in Trinidad and left, I think, around the age of 6 or 7. And her music is infused by it. And Cardi B's mother is from Trinidad. Her father is, I believe, from the Dominican Republic. And she has gone back many times to the country. And at her daughter's birthday party was playing our most famous star. And this is a way that I'm able to then begin to use some of the resources from the center that becomes some of the students' projects, the way they begin to sonically connect New Orleans, they begin to sonically connect their African-American soundtrack and to that of the Caribbean. And then they begin to explore through these deep dives, these linkages and connections. Then I show them other forms of linkages and connections that are right around them. So here in New Orleans, our HBCU to the right over here, you see this is Dr. Verrett. He is Haitian born. He's the president of Xavier, our HBCU. And here is Dr. Wayne Fredericks, who is the president of Howard University in Washington, D.C. He's also born and raised in Trinidad. And then I go back historically and I show them Stokely Carmichael, who was the sort of the founder of Black Power, who was also born and raised in Trinidad, and how much our HBCUs and our heritage is connected to their own experience. And that allows them to, again, begin to enter into resources and archives because they've developed this connection and interest. I also begin to have them consider these connections beyond their classroom walls. So here is our classroom without walls, another way that I bring sort of these connections to life hyperlocally. So what you're looking at here is the Whitney Plantation. It's in the River Parishes, which is a little on the outskirts of the Greater New Orleans area. And this is actually the remembrance monument for the 1811 slave revolt, of which many students don't understand is the largest revolt here in our area. And so the students are looking at some of the main figures who are being memorialized in the revolt, and they were stunned that, you know, they lost, but when they looked down in this bottom left-hand side and saw where they were originally brought before coming to New Orleans, they see all of these Caribbean and Latin American spaces as where these the main leaders of the 1811 revolt came from. And then they begin to see these connections between these histories. So that's our classroom without walls. And then they take these sort of connections that I allow them to see to begin to take that deep dive into the resources. So before I tell undergraduates, okay, here's all these valuable resources that help you to understand where you come from, who the places are, I connect them to the spaces that they're in. Let those connections come to life because they may not have been quite clear to students. And then our students begin to do deep dives. And so here's a student who did a research project on Jose Antonio Ponte. She's actually an artist. So she sketched that doodle on the side of her project, but it allowed her to go back into resources provided by the center. And she decided to study him for one of her projects. And then here she saw the New Orleans connections between Aponte, between Cuba and New Orleans. as she dives into realizing that Antonio Maceo, one of the Cuban independent leaders, also lived in Treme in New Orleans. And this was part of one of her additional projects. And then she did a final research project connecting Afro-Cuban revolutionary figures, and some of the connections that they may have to African American struggles and communities around the same time. And then our students then go out into the community and they begin to map these connections between New Orleans, Latin America, and the Caribbean, culminating in this digital project that you're looking at here. Um, Again, using resources from the center to help underscore and outline the real life spatial research that they're doing in their coursework. Here's another way in which students, particularly in my communications classes, begin to, describe and capture some of the voices of these connections, from newer migrant communities to older forms of connections between New Orleans, Latin America, and the Caribbean through this My NOLA, My Story project. Um, and then I wanted to share one of the culminating projects that the students get to do in one of the courses, which is a critical thinking approach to understanding the connections between Latin America, the Caribbean, New Orleans, and the US. And so this is on the Duke platform. There is an English translation of the Haitian Declaration of Independence. So the students get to compare and study this side by side with the US Declaration of Independence. And so this resource, among many resources, are all scaffolded across their classes. And since I have access as a SURF fellow, I get to either pull these sonic resources, pull these visual resources, or pull these historical text documents, and then I upload them for the classes. So the students were able to read the Haitian Declaration of Independence and hear, as African American students, were some of their reflections when they do this particular exercise. I'm just highlighting a little snippet of it. But one student, noted in terms of how was the Haitian Declaration of Independence unique for its time. She said Haiti's freedom for all truly meant freedom for all Native individuals of all colors of people, not just white people or rich people. Additionally, the Haitian Declaration of Independence continuously spoke against enslavement of people. And during this time, people of African descent were not thought of to be strategic or intelligent enough to win a war against a European nation, yet alone write an entire Declaration of Independence to proclaim their own freedom permanently throughout the world. In looking at those specific words that were enshrined in the Haitian Declaration of Independence and comparing and thinking with the US Declaration of Independence, one student highlighted this text from the Duke translation: "Let us frighten all those who dare to try to take liberty from us again." In this declaration, Haitian leaders knew that other nations were frightened of them, and they were almost saying, "Good, I'm glad you're frightened of us." They did not care how they appeared to other nations. Their concern was to maintain freedom, and that could not happen unless France and others knew that Haitians were always willing to fight, but most importantly, always prepared to win. And so these are some of the exercises that opened up and connect students both through their own entry point into understanding Latin America and the Caribbean, and secondly, their ability to then take that excitement about these connections, go into these resources that are available that I am able to access as a SURF fellow, and then connect them to their understanding of Black lived experiences elsewhere in the Americas, that they may not have always thought had connections to their own Black to live experience here in the United States. So this is just a nice little snapshot or window into how I teach Latin America and the Caribbean using the resources that were available to me during my time as a college educators research fellow. And so thank you to this fellowship for providing those resources for teaching students. And I'm happy to follow up with the conversation afterwards about ways in which how else this is scaffolded in other classes. Thank you, Corinne.
Yes, thank you so much, Sharon. Thank you for the engaging presentation, for the information, for the great playlist to wake us up this morning. It's always greatly appreciated. Again, we'll have a Q&A with Sharon and with Shannon just after our next speaker. Our next speaker is, I lost her. Sorry, is Dr. Melissa Bice. She received her PhD in political science from the University of Tennessee in 2013. Her research and teaching interests include gender and ethnicity in Latin America, the role of international and regional organizations in promoting human rights across the globe, and the development of an international human rights regime around sexual orientation and gender identity. She received a grant from the Center for European Studies in 2018 to enhance her international organizations class with content about European Union governance, and has continued to pull from this experience in teaching democracy and governance related to international organizations. Melissa, thank you for being with us today. We're excited to hear what you have to say.
First of all, thank you so much for that introduction. And it occurred to me as you were speaking that I did not identify where I'm coming from. I am an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina at Pembroke. And I also want to express my gratitude for the grant that helped me enrich my international organizations class. But I'm also just really grateful to be here today and hearing these really rich presentations on how people are, have creatively enriched their classes using various resources through this consortium. I'm just really impressed and honored to be part of this diverse and honestly specialist panel. So thank you to the other presenters. I'm learning a lot about how I might be able to utilize resources in the future from you guys. So my own experience is that I get research ideas. I'm a professor first. I'm an instructor first. And teaching political science, specifically comparative politics, usually entails you to specialize in one area. And in graduate school, the area I picked was Latin America. So, and I've also been lucky enough to be involved in the annual conference for NC Center for Latin American Studies. And so Beatriz, I recognize your name. So I'm just, so I actually have two kind of, or maybe even sometimes 2.5 areas that I focus on. So I consider Latin America my specialty, but I also have a global focus, and my teaching focuses on international dynamics as well as specific regions. So my second region is Europe, and I get a lot of my research ideas from teaching. And so I try to then have a feedback where I turn those research ideas back into teaching opportunities. So COVID presented a unique challenge to all of us, but for minority serving institutions in the rural South, some of those obstacles are already existing pre-COVID. And the grant I received was pre-COVID. And it turned out that the year that I got the grant, I really wasn't able to travel, which I really love to do. I've led several study abroad, both to Latin America and to Germany trips. And I definitely think that those are invaluable experiences. But the realities of students going to school in the South is that they may not have the opportunity or the resources to pursue the, travel. So one of my ideas for how to use this grant was how to bring the global into the classroom and to give students a more enriched experience. So I am going to share my PowerPoint presentation that I use just to keep myself from rambling. And there's a lot more. Hopefully, if you have questions, you can ask me during the follow-up. So virtual reality is a kind of new technology, and it's really been used, I guess, in elementary and high school settings. And so there's less research about the role that it plays in the college classroom. So I wanted to explore some of the possibilities there. So first of all, let me talk about what it is for those who are not necessarily familiar. Virtual reality is described as a 3D environment in which a person can become immersed using a dedicated headset powered by a computer, game, console, or smartphone. The VR experience can be enhanced thanks to 3D audio sounds and by using haptics devices that use sensors to transfer body movement into the virtual space. Augmented reality refers to a real-world environment enhanced with computer-generated information such as sound, video, or graphics. So we focus mostly on VR. AR is a totally different area I will leave out. And pretty much that's they're similar technologies that are meant to enhance sensory experiences. My own personal and professional experience with technology is, so I'm married to one of these early adopter types, and that's how I got introduced to virtual reality. But I do try to bring in technology into the classroom where it can be helpful. So Kahoot quizzes. I use online software sometimes to do role-playing simulations. So ways to just trying to find ways to meet students where they are with technology and help them also connect through technology, which is something that they're accustomed to doing. So the course that I used the grant for was international organizations, and we have a very strong core of Model United Nations students who really enjoy the role-playing experience and simulations, and they put their all into it. They go to conference twice a year. And they usually form the core of this class that I've taught twice now. So I decided to make the emphasis on the European Union since it is a very different type of organization than an international organization. It's a regional organization that has a lot more governance structure than other regional organizations. So it's unique in a lot of ways. Another thing is that because of Europe's geopolitical position in the world, international and global issues remain relevant. For example, the Syrian refugee crisis, right? Europe played an important role in receiving some of the refugees at a time when not many countries were willing to. Another reason that I thought VR would be interesting is that I had noticed that the United Nations and the UN were already directing their attention. The United Nations and the European Union, were already directing their attention to the role that virtual reality can play, really on two different fronts. The United Nations, this is from the United Nations Virtual Reality Project website, which talks about the potential for building empathy and providing a deeper understanding for people living in the most complex and challenging situations. One of their most famous productions is Clouds Over Sidra, and it follows a Syrian refugee living in a refugee camp in Jordan. And this is how I introduced virtual reality to my students. I'll get to that later. And the first question that a lot of people have had when I talk about using virtual reality is, how is this different from videos? And I don't really know how to explain it, except that it is. It has to do with the way that these things are filmed. So perspective is definitely part of it. The narratives are important. And there's a moment in Clouds Over Sidra where you're sitting across from a young girl who's 12 years old and who's missing her school friends, and who begins to cry. And I personally witnessed just about every one of my students begin to cry. And I almost cried thinking about it, right? So it is an immersive experience. All of your other senses are blacked out. And so it's just, it's easy to empathize. And the United Nations has used virtual reality headsets in a lot of its outreach projects and a lot of its education projects with various stakeholders through, the United Nations system. So this is one way that I thought that we could simulate it. In my international organizations classes, I already have role-playing simulations of the European Union. So I thought, we will behave like international organizations do and use this as a way to educate stakeholders and other member states for our negotiations. Another relevant but probably secondary issue is the role that virtual reality has in economic systems and how policy will adapt to adjust for research and development, content production, software development, hardware manufacturing. There is, this is it's really just one way to take a piece of the economy and show how interconnected it is globally and how regional organizations play a policy or play a role in spelling out policy for how these things are going to work together. So in terms of understanding like the global manufacturing chain, understanding job opportunities and career development, there's something here. But again, the primary goal is to talk about how we can bring the global into people's lives. So how can we, how does VR enhance people's experiences of global situations? Can we build empathy? Can we build understanding, a better understanding using these exercises using VR? I also use VR to enhance peer-to-peer instruction during the simulations in the classroom and to empower students to make their own content. Now, we're not yet developed enough to where they can make their own VR videos, but there are so many videos produced and available for free that putting together their own package was possible, and allowed them to communicate the importance of specific issues to other students that they were really educating. And then, as I mentioned, what is the workforce? Are there workforce implications? And is this helpful to them to learn how to use new technology in the classroom and kind of under the guise of play, and again, I think that empathy and cultural competency are definitely important considerations that in political science, we don't always, focus on. And as a social science, I believe we should. So in addition, I think that there is high potential for stimulation exercises for people who are not necessarily comfortable with public presenting. There is, there are tools on the virtual reality headset that help people practice giving presentations. And other types of training. There's language training. For example, I know that there is an indigenous language training app where you're immersed and you're being shown what words are with 3D objects. And, so there's a lot of research happening on cognitive psychology, cognitive behavioral analysis to really understand how VR can be a tool for learning, but I'm not necessarily trained in that. So the way that I use this was to purchase headsets for this international organizations class. Students were already engaged in face-to-face simulations. They play the role of a country and they have to negotiate on several issues. Students were asked to create their own video projects that were relevant to the role they played in the European Union. And they presented these projects as well as prepared a separate project for the general public. So to convince, for example, your constituents that we need to accept more refugees from the Middle East, for example. And so I also, though, asked them to compile videos about their member state. And for people like Spain at the time, there were protests happening about Catalonia, and they were able to put together videos that really captured on the ground experiences, and those were very powerful. So I just wanted to sort of conclude what I learned during this sort of brief excursion through technology is that there really isn't a replacement for getting on a plane and taking a group of students to another country and experiencing that firsthand. But if there is a second best option, it is probably the virtual reality experience. And I expect that as this technology expands, that will become even more impressive. The students expressed these general sentiments. The new technology was fun. They thought it was easier for them to interact with their peers in this way that they were supposed to be, influencing their peers and teaching them something. This gave them kind of a better platform to do that. They could be like, you just need to watch this really cool video and you'll understand. The suggestions that they did have, which I agree with, that there should be some type of app built where we could do international organizations simulations, these role-playing games, using the actual headsets as the platform. During COVID, we really could have used this technology to be more advanced so that we could have real virtual classrooms. And that is something that the VR headset environment allows for groups of people to kind of share one virtual space and communicate back and forth through it. But for this to happen, we're going to need to make VR more affordable and more accessible. Buying a VR headset is more affordable than an airplane ticket, but for rural students, not necessarily a feasible. It's not necessarily a feasible cost. So I think really that we are approximating the firsthand experience to gain a little bit of cultural competency. I think that I learned a lot about how to use new technology in the classroom and how students will respond to that. But again, hopefully we can continue to find the resources to get students to actually travel. But I really am grateful for this experience and thank you all for your time. Hope I haven't been the exception and gone over, but thank you all.
You are right on time.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And we're very excited to be able to feature you today. That concludes our final panelist. So I'm going to open it up for questions. Katie just put a blog post about Melissa putting VR in her classroom on in the chat there. So please be sure to check that out after our conference. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to raise your hand or put it in the chat for any of our panelists. Yes, Katie.
Thank you. I couldn't find the raise hand button.
It's very complicated, I know.
Yes, we haven't been doing Zoom for very long at all, have we?
I know, right?
Thank you so much to all of you. This is just really, really fantastic from the start this morning. And we all, I think I speak for all of us here at UNC and Duke that we're so grateful to you for sharing your stories. And these are, I think we all would like to be in your classrooms and to see what you're doing and the creativity and the efforts that you put in. And we all know that resources everywhere are so slim, and the effort that you're putting in is really just remarkable. So thank you. Melissa, it was great to hear from you about student response, and also from you, Sharon, how you hook your students. I really appreciated hearing that. So I'd love to hear a little bit more, and even just anecdotally about where you see the impact on your students, and how what you're doing in your classrooms and all this effort you're putting in, where do you see your students taking that information? Do you feel like it changes? Clearly, it adds to their music education in your classroom, but where is, and how do what happens after the class they take with you? Do you I feel like and certainly, of course, going abroad is one of those situations where you see folks come back and say, oh, my life has changed forever. But I can also see that happening in your classrooms. And so I would, if you wouldn't mind sharing some anecdotes or some stories, that'd be great.
I can go. So definitely, one of the things that our students have less of opportunity to do is go abroad, right? So most historically Black university students have some form of financial aid assistance to go to college anyway. Our study abroad rates are low, is extremely costly. It's not something that they can afford to do. And so the reason why I emphasize that, if you look around you, you see your Latin American presence right in your own communities, is the most important focus of the approach to teaching area studies at an HBCU, right? We do have success stories of going abroad. So just this past year, I had my second student receive the Frederick Douglass Global Fellowship. So she, out of 200 applicants, she's another student who took one of my classes. And she does have Haitian roots, actually. And so she is working on the board of our French school. We have a French school here in the city. It's called Lycée Français. And she is on the secretary of the board, helping to rewrite their anti-racism, anti-bias, diversity and inclusion community approach, right? And one of the things that she's looking is, how can I look to Haiti and education in Haiti as a framework for Black students to enter into a French school's academic curriculum and provide the resources from Haiti into that school's approach to decolonizing French education in a Black city where most of the children are Black. So out of this class became this very hyper-local work that is area focused in nature. And this work that she wrote in her application got her this global fellowship that funded for her to completely go abroad to Europe, right? So out of a class came a community project that came a global funded opportunity. So these are some of the ways in which some students have gone and worked with the Haitian community here in the city. You know, they've worked with Central American communities in the city that lead to things that track onto their career path. We have a large number of STEM students now who are taking up learning Spanish and French as their minors, so that they, if they are going to, most of them want to go back to work in hospitals that serve underserved communities. Black and brown communities are side by side, but as an African-American physician, they realize I need to learn Spanish, right? So we're having sort of the understanding now that awakens their ability to say, I can serve these communities right here as a future professional. And while I'm in college, how do I connect to them right in my city so that I begin to understand their experiences and connect them to my own lived experiences as an African American, right? So the introduction of this in the classwork and showing it from a local level pulls them in. We do not have the resources of the Duke UNC's archives, but that gives them now the data to go back and understand and study how we came to be what we are. And then this propels them forward professionally.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
That's an amazing success story. Just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Sharon. Abby has a hand raised.
Good morning, and this is for Shannon. And Shannon, it's Abby Allen from Sand Hills Community College. I worked out before the video, so I'm not going to show a picture of me. Quick question. You were talking about Humanities 120. Do you always use it for Mideast cultures, or do you change it up? Because that's a course you can do that in.
Right, right. For those of you who don't know, it's literally the title is Cultural Studies, so it can be taken however. On our campus to date, it used to be used for a course called The South in Black and White. That was a course about the Southeast racial issues, but we have used it. We started using it some for the Mideast studies, Mideast cultural studies. We have not done another area studies course with it yet. I have my eye on doing a diversity in Latin America course for it, but I haven't taken that step and said I'm going to do it yet. It's a little tricky because we want to change it up, but then students can't do multiples. There's administrative issues of how much you can do with it. but as of now, the Black and South and White course is not happening anymore. So right now it is purely mini studies.
Okay.
But because there's so much, it's an elective, and there's not a lot of room in the student's plan of study to include it. We've leaned more towards trying to put the area studies in everywhere else, the courses that they're going to take no matter what. So that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, that we would love to have the niche courses, but at the same time, that will hit 15 to 20 students, whereas if I put it in world history, it hits hundreds.
I agree. Right. Thank you.
May I add that Humanities 120 has been used by some of the other NC Global Distinction faculty to develop, at the very least I know of 2 with a Latin American focus, and I wonder if they're, if it's been used to develop other areas as well. I think it was Pitt. I don't remember the schools, although I have them if anybody's interested.
A related question from Kevin, who put in the chat. Do y'all agree with Matt Cook's assessment in the first session that there is a strong student and faculty demand for global content? How does that manifest on y'all's campuses?
Well, so, COVID notwithstanding, they're actually there. I feel like at UNCP, again, we're a rural campus in Southeast North Carolina, and we are a minority serving institution. And so I think the stereotype might be that there's not a lot of demand at schools like ours, but there is quite a bit. Now, finding the resources sometimes can be problematic, but our professors are very driven. We do have a lot of globally minded professors who they themselves, definitely promote the spirit of travel to their students, and the students usually respond really well. When we offer study abroad, we usually have more than enough students sign up to make the trip, and they're very excited. And they were actually we were scheduled to go to Germany in 2020, and it got canceled because of COVID. Another trip was scheduled to go to Greece in December, and it also got canceled because of COVID. And the students were very, very disappointed by that. Now, one of the things that I think that our study abroad office, it's the International Programs Office is what it was called. What they were really good at doing was helping, keep the cost of some of these trips down, especially to Europe. Now, going to Latin America seems to be very expensive, and that is in itself prohibitive for some students. So, but when things open back up with COVID, hopefully we'll see that same demand there. But prior to COVID, I think that there was a growing demand to make it a global experience, or at least have a global component.
I would like to add that when I feel like once this, can you hear me, or I'm not muted?
I can hear you.
Okay. Okay, sorry. I feel like the student demand grows on itself. So like if you were to ask my students on day 1, do you want global topics in our course? Are you interested in this? They're probably going to be like, I don't know. What are you talking about? But like now, just what I've seen and what's happened in the Spanish program, I know that one best because that's what I do. I have a feeling if students who came out of Spanish 1, I see them light up when we talk about, because we don't just do Asian Latino, we do Afro Latino and Chicano. And so once they've seen all of this and they've connected their courses, if they were to go into a Spanish 2 that didn't do that, I think I would hear about it. So they once they kind of light up on it, that demand grows. So I think if you can get started, you'll see that continue.
So interestingly enough, the Black Lives Matter movement over the summer and its global solidarity kicked up interest in global studies, if you will, on our campus. And it also coincided with a Mellon-funded initiative for us to move our African American and African diaspora studies minor into a full major. As an HBCU, it's sad to say we didn't have a full major in any kind of Black studies. We just don't have enough faculty to teach across a whole major, to build it out, those sort of things. But we always had a minor, and all students are required to take at least one African American and Diaspora Studies course as part of their degree, which is a standard sort of feature at every HBCU. All of our classes are tinged and infused with study of the Black experience, but as a distinct program, we've only had a minor. So we're currently actually with this Mellon funded initiative, building out this major. And the goal is so that it will be easy for students to double major between being a future doctor and also studying the Black experience, or being a politician or going into law and also studying the Black experience. And we call it African American and African diaspora because we want the Black American experience to be in conversation with the Black diasporic experience. And so my course and also the Modern Languages Department recently sort of rebranded itself under an Afro-Latin American and Caribbean focus. And they opt students in that minor once they switch their branding from French, Spanish, and everything else in between to this Afro-focused global look. And now more students have started taking the classes in the Modern Languages Department because of how they've repackaged their classes, as opposed to students saying, oh, go take Spanish for 6 classes, right? You're taking understanding the Hispanic experience in conversation with Blackness, right? And that is what has pulled in our HBCU students into wanting to do global studies and better understand how Black people around the world see and perceive themselves in relative perception to their own experiences. So I would say that Black Lives Matter and its global impact and them sort of hearing the experiences of Black people around the world is something that is drawing, African American students to global studies. And we're trying to now make it more manageable curriculum-wise, that students can double major between an existing discipline and the study of the Black diaspora. And we hope to build this out within the next 2 to 3 years at our university. So that's sort of an approach, because again, study abroad is just too expensive for many of our African American students to face, in addition to the rising cost of a college education. And so if we can find ways to localize global education for them, we can bring groups to them, we can bring resources to them. We do have our own faculty-led programs that are smaller, shorter, and cheaper. 1 or 2 week visits to Cuba, we do a lot of those. Costa Rica, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, West Africa. Those are the things that we're able to pull off. We will be back to going to Cuba as soon as things open back up again. But we don't do large scale study abroad programs. They are available to students, but we mostly take students on cheaper, smaller faculty-led projects abroad.
Thank you so much for that. I think we have time for one more question, a brief one from Donna Benson in the chat. She says, Dr. Roberts, the Haitian Declaration was powerful. Can faculty who do not have fellowships have access to the primary sources? How do you archive and digitalize student work? And before you answer that, I'm actually going to put a link into the chat, which is an online translation of the Haitian Declaration of Independence from Duke's website. Happen to have it bookmarked on my computer. So that is the translated version through Duke. So that is one primary source that is available to everyone for free on the internet. I just wanted to add that in the chat. So Sharon, I'll let you answer how you archive and digitalize student work and do those sort of things in your classroom.
So thankfully, my time working with the UNC Duke Educator Research Fellow program, I was exposed to what is public facing from their resources and archives, and I just came up with this huge list. And I've just populated a couple of courses with those. So students who are interested in looking at sort of sonic comparisons between the region, there are these open documents, and there are students who are interested in spatial and visual comparisons, or students who are interested in looking at social movements. Both the UNC and Duke's resource centers have these sort of public faces, already digitized resources that I put in my Brightspace, and the student is able to go do their projects based off of these either movements, social movements, or sonic connections, things like that. And then for those things that that aren't digitized or public facing, my time as a fellow allowed me to go there and scan like crazy. So I have a huge hard drive full of stuff that I just pulled from the archives when I visited, and I'm able to either incorporate in lectures or make available to students whose final projects will need to use those resources that we don't have as an HBCU. And then secondly, the projects that are student curated are located on our Omeka platform, which is called My NOLA, My Story. And also there's a YouTube playlist connected to that particular exercise. So students do research, but they also create their own sort of records as well. Not all studies connect New Orleans and Latin America, but some of the projects, not all projects do, but some do, but they all do sort of a final deep dive research project. And I just sort of keep those in my own repository. So that's pretty much how I manage, incorporating the resources into the class.
Perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you so much to Melissa, Sharon, and Shannon for being with us today, for offering your expertise. We're so thankful to you for being here and sharing your stories. It's very much appreciated. So thank you. We're going to take a brief 5-minute break, and then we're going to come back for another Q&A session with kind of just general Q&A, and we'll also be doing some evaluation at that time. So if everyone could meet us back here at 11:33, we will continue on with our session.
Really important for us and that we would love to have y'all's input on is to get some feedback from you. I've just put a link into the chat with the feedback form, and our colleague Fabiola Salas Villalobos will be working through that feedback. We really appreciate y'all's honest answers to help us improve our programs. My name is Kevin Fogg. I'm the Associate Director of the Carolina Asia Center. And let me also introduce my colleague, Ada Omenwaliri, who's the Associate Director at the African Studies Center.
Everyone, nice to meet you all. I missed the initial intro. So I'm currently the Associate Director of the African Studies Center, and also acting as my supervisor is on leave, Emily Burrell, whom most of you may know of. So, I mean, Emma had shared what we at the center do, and we pretty much have a lot of resources here available for you. And if you're interested, definitely reach out to me. I'm going to leave my email in the chat box, and you can feel free to reach out to me. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, thanks, Ada. So this Q&A session is broad and general. Feel free to be clicking on the feedback form now if you need to make sure that we do get that feedback that's so useful. We welcome questions during this session, either for the speakers that you've heard from this morning, who have got great ideas on how to integrate global content in the universities and community colleges where y'all teach. Or if you've got questions for us at the area studies centers at Duke and UNC, we welcome those as well. We're happy to navigate questions about what we offer, how we can support you, or how we can connect to build on ideas in a one-on-one basis. So I'm just going to resend this feedback form in the chat. Hopefully everyone can catch that. And we'll begin to work through some of the questions. We had questions that came in earlier sessions that we weren't able to tackle. From Shannon Han, who spoke in the second session, she asked at the top, to fund international travel, what percentage of the cost do your institutions have to fund? At community colleges, they don't provide funding for that. So I've just dropped Shannon's question into the chat. I don't know if some of our colleagues, Matt Cook talked about international travel, and Rose Sakafiu also talked about her international travel. Do y'all want to talk about your experiences? How much can be covered by the grants that you're able to get and how much needs to come from your home institutions?
I can add something here from the AIPS angle, and that is that I never assume that a community college or MSI is going to have any matching funds. So all the programs that we do, we fully fund. I mean, it would be nice, but the reality is that, you know, the amount of funds that are available are limited, and there are different individuals who are in groups and priorities that are competing for them. So if we like to sort of promote Asian studies or South Asia or Pakistan, it's always much more helpful if you can bring something to the table. It's been my observation that our administrators are open to all kinds of suggestions as long as you're not asking for money to assist them. So if you can bring your own resources to the table, as we've been able to in a lot of cases, that promotes success. But I never, as I said, I never assume that there's going to be a match under those circumstances.
I would like, were you done, Matt? Okay, yeah, we have some funding from the Professional Development Committee. And in the past, I think it's domestic travel for one academic year, I think is $1,500. And I think for international travel, it is $2,500. And it's been so long, it seems like COVID has lasted forever. Yeah, sorry, I think those are accurate. And that supports our travel within our institution. Whenever we are given like a grant from either Carolina Asia Center or from the African Studies Center, we don't actually combine them. So some of my international travel, if I'm not sponsored by you all, then it's the Professional Development Committee. And I think we all know that route. An application, the acceptance letter, the budget, and so on. And if it's not done ahead of time, I mean, before the trip, then you travel and then you document everything, and then a faculty member is reimbursed. So I hope that answers the question.
That's very helpful. Thank you both to Matt and to Rose for talking through y'all's experiences. Matt, you want to come back and add a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll just say, you know, we also have some, similar to what Rose laid out, we do have some faculty development funding, but it's almost always gone by January. So
how is that possible?
So it's going somewhere. So it exists, right? At least for a short period of time.
We kind of spread ours out. Yeah, what we do, I think, to prevent it from just floating away is months in advance. So you have to kind of project. Is your conference, is it in the fall or is it in the spring, and so on. So what I'm trying to say is that it helps for us to be strategic.
Yes, very much so. And this is again why, for example, AIPS offers its members conference grants.
Okay.
So if there are, you know, individuals at HBCUs, community colleges, or other MSIs who are interested in presenting research that's focused, in this case, on Pakistan, we have travel grants that we offer in order to promote those things.
Excellent.
Thank you both. That's really helpful. We've got a lot of questions that are lining up, so I'm going to keep us moving forward. We've got a question from Donna Benson that I'm just throwing into the chat now, who asks, how are the panelists building up the resources of their university libraries? This is a great challenge, certainly at this time when we're transitioning to a lot of digital or virtual resources for those libraries. Shannon, you spoke to this a little bit at Durham Tech. I wonder if you want to share your experience. We already heard a little bit from Sharon Roberts about how she was accessing digital archives for her research. Shannon, are you able to speak to this?
To the extent that it's on our to-do list, our library acquisitions have been mostly in books and more print resources in the past. We are now able to get access to an additional films on demand database, and we're looking at other database options for funding those. And I've kind of collected to some degree, and the dean of our department has collected to some degree some of the different projects and resources that have been created, but we haven't yet found like a central place to house that or how to do that. So, but we've talked to the library, but it's just one of those projects that kind of just, we have trouble getting to the top of the list.
Yeah, it is a challenge. I mean, this is something where part of course development grants that some of the centers will offer can support the purchase of materials. And those materials can go into institutional libraries. But to do that at scale can be a real challenge, right? For a specific course, if you can anticipate what resources the students needs, we're excited to support you to get those resources. But to do it at scale is a great challenge. I'm already seeing hands and I'm getting more chats, but I'm told that our colleague Solomon Burnett had a question about professional upstreaming. Solomon, can I spotlight you and ask you to join?
If you please, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. I just want to say thanks for all of this. I'm a graduate of North Carolina Central University. I studied under Matthew Cook in undergrad. Salute, Professor Cook. I also have an associate's degree from Durham Tech. And, you know, I did a little bid when I was a teenager, and my GED is from Sand Hills Community College via Sand Hills Correctional Institute. And I studied abroad with the Duke Engage program, studying Arabic in Yemen, and now I'm assistant to the president at St. Augustine's University in Raleigh. And, you know, I just want to say that I'm an absolute product of the collaborations between these consortiums, HBCUs, public-private partnerships, and the like. And I just want to just say thanks to everything y'all are doing. And I have a question about the strategic planning and grand design of this whole thing. HBCUs are working to correct a 500-year forced illiteracy. And this is a programmatic necessity and ideal that no other educational matrix has to deal with. And so in addition to looking to the immediate funding, pedagogical and curricular concerns, we also have to look towards the future as to what preparatory products are we looking to create. What I've noticed in my studies at majority institutions and Ivy institutions is that they have entrenched pipelines into public-private employment spheres, be they governmental, be they NGOs, be they nonprofits, that allow students the immediate application of their internationalized education and their language sets. My question is, are these pipelines and upstreams developed only via alumni associations? And how would someone new in the game like a HBCU go about developing these so that our students aren't only sold a dream with a Pell Grant, but so that we can ensure that they have a space to apply their newly found skill sets and intelligences?
I love so much about this, not only, you know, the shout outs that you've given to the other institutions, but also raising a really important issue for the sister institutions who are on this call, but also for us at UNC to make sure that we're supporting you. I'll say a little bit about what I hope UNC is able to do to partner with colleagues like St. Aug's, which is a valued member of the higher education sort of community in North Carolina. And then I might hand off to other panelists if they've got ideas. One of the things about the area studies centers at Duke and UNC that we're commissioned to do as part of our funding from the US Department of Education is to think about how the students with global knowledge, students with world language education or with area studies backgrounds will contribute to the United States. Some of that is going into government service, and we're always excited to get speakers from the government these days to come and talk to our students at UNC to help them think about what the future might be if they choose to go into government service. Some of that is to think about NGOs, to think about international business, to think about sort of other routes that they could be using that language and area studies knowledge. One of the things that I would love to get proposals for and that we'd love to work with y'all on, when we bring current government speakers to UNC to talk about careers, we did a big panel in March on women's leadership in the federal government, where we had an active duty Air Force colonel, we had an acting assistant director of the State Department, a former ambassador and an alumnus of the National Geospatial Intelligence Service. When we get speakers like that to UNC in a virtual talk, how can we also connect them to y'all's campuses? Because they would love to get y'all's graduates, right? The folks who have, as Professor Roberts was talking about, not just that awareness of global issues, but also an awareness of how their communities have been underserved and how they could fit into a better future, right? We would love to connect with y'all on that. I'd love to think about ways that we can loop you in on those proposals and draft something together that would be useful for your students and encourage them to think about global careers. You also asked, is that entirely about alumni networks? Certainly at UNC, we try very hard to mobilize our alumni. So we run a global careers night, pulling from our alumni every year in February to say, here's what I'm doing with the knowledge that I gained. If that's a useful model for y'all, we'd love to talk with you about how we do it and what it might look like for you. In some ways, that's a hard thing to do. UNC is a big institution. So we've got a lot of alumni out there that we can go fishing from. At some of the smaller institutions, that's a harder lift. Now, let me pause here. I've monologued too long on that really good question. Do I have colleagues or do we have other panelists who want to jump in on this one? Rose.
I just have one comment. At each institution, there is international programs. So one way that you might connect with smaller institutions is by, how can I put it, having a stronger support system. We have Office of International Programs, and that would be your direct link. That's my only comment. And I'm sure you're already connected. But yeah, sharing this type of information about global career fairs is superb. That's my only comment.
Thank you. Other thoughts, either from the panelists or from my colleagues?
Just wanted to add to Rose's point that there are on HBCU campuses or MSI campus, a core group of faculty members who are driving internationalization, right? And once you connect to who they are, you find the students who become your potential pipeline students, right? Yes. I can name on my hand who are my colleagues who are doing exactly what I'm doing, right? The ones who are writing the grants, the ones who are connecting to larger institutions for resources, programming, either funding for the faculty members. So many times, to piggyback to the grant question, all of the foreign-led programs that I have done, I have written grant funding to pay for every student that traveled, right? And then the students would do like fundraisers, car washes to get their money to buy souvenirs or to go, get on a bus and go explore, these sorts of things, right? And so sometimes that particular faculty member doesn't even have the funding. They may have to come out of pocket. So they wrote the grant that will pay for the students, but they don't have the money to go, right? So, the resources that fund faculty members to go and take student-led projects at larger schools, bigger schools could cover that faculty member if they have a accompanying grant elsewhere that will also allow them to take students along on their research projects or other sort of, faculty designed sort of projects abroad, right? But I would definitely say you can go to the international office. They will send out a campus-wide sort of notification for students to come, and the students may or may not come. But if you know who that faculty member is, they will embed that inside of that class. And I guarantee you 1 or 2 students are going to be like, how do I network with this person? Because I want to be part of the Peace Corps, or I want to, consider maybe going to work for the State Department. I want to work for that kind of nonprofit that's doing that kind of stuff. Or this person's an activist. How do I get in contact? This person's an artist. How do I get in touch with them, right? So sometimes doing the homework, finding out who are the people, and your international office will actually probably know who they are. But you have a more penetrable reach if you figure out who the faculty member is that's driving this in their program.
And I'm glad you said that. I love what you said, Sharon. And yeah, we have that network at WSSU and I'm part of it. That was superb.
We have more questions lining up. This was a great one. I think Dr. Burnett has sort of raised the issue that we've got a lot of great focus in our area study centers about how to connect with and support faculty. And we've got a good opportunity to make sure that we're also connecting with and supporting y'all's students as they sort of launch into these careers. Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
I think we've got a question from Matthew Cook, who's been on our panel. Matt, can I highlight you?
Yeah, sure. So it's not so much a question, but as a very quick follow-up. I know when I first came to Central, we got lots and lots of books from the Title VI Center that used to exist for South Asia, which was a consortium of UNC and Duke. One of the things that I've noticed in terms of, we had a Mellon-funded collaboration for digital humanities of Duke, and also previously with the Carolina Asia Center, was that affiliations for faculty with UNC or Duke had been really, really helpful. So one of the sort of things that I constantly heard from the faculty who were part of the DH Mellon project was that, wow, I have access to their materials because I have some kind of standing on their campus as visiting faculty or something like that. And that was really helpful in terms of access to materials in a way that sending a bunch of books and having them sit in our libraries doesn't really work any longer, and it's cheaper. And it was the same thing with the Carolina Asia Center. For some years, I know they had a lot of opportunities for folks to be affiliated faculty. And I know that that was also helpful because that gives people in the system access to the resources without having to tangibly have the resources themselves. So those were two things that were very helpful. And the other thing that's helpful about this kind of event is not only do resources is a great opportunity for networking resources, it's also opportunities for it to go the other way. So for example, you know, I had the Undersecretary of State for South Asian Affairs come to Central a few years ago. And it didn't occur to me, or I didn't have these kinds of contacts here at that time. We could have sent her over to UNC because we had her on our campus already. So it makes sense. And that's one of the nice things about this event is there's a flow of information and networking that can happen across campuses and not only, you know, down, up, but up, down, and across all over the place.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. There are a lot of ways that we are learning from y'all on how best to integrate these ideas. And that's one of the reasons that we're so excited to be working with our colleagues. I think I have gone through most of the faculty questions. We have an interesting question from our colleague, Shamila Udyavar, and I'll just throw that into the chat now. But she asks, as an administrator, she wants to know how to promote opportunities to faculty at her institution. I wonder if we've got input from faculty members on how they would like administrators to be promoting this to them, or if we've got thoughts from my colleagues at UNC about how this has worked most effectively at other campuses.
Well, this is just my experience, but our administrators are really good about keeping tabs on funding opportunities. And so I found out through this because it was communicated to my department chair, who knows what my research and teaching looks like and thought it would be appropriate for me. So I think communication is key. I don't know, maybe department chairs. I guess it really depends on how the flow of information works at your university.
Yeah, thank you. We at the area study centers try to keep folks informed about our opportunities in part through newsletters. The first chat today, the very first thing that got sent out was the websites for all 5 of the area study centers and consortia at Duke and UNC that are on this call. We would love to get y'all on our newsletters if you're interested in one of the areas, or if you're not yet interested in one of the areas that we serve, but would like to figure out ways to integrate it into your course. We try to get that information out largely through our newsletters. And so faculty will self-identify, oh, I'm trying to add content on China. I'm looking to figure out how to, add Vietnamese perspectives to my course on the Vietnam War. And so those are the folks who will reach out to us. From the administrative side, we entertain proposals from administrators, but what we look for are for them to identify the faculty members to us, right? We can show you some examples of what we've done on other campuses. But if you can say, oh, we've got a broad survey of world religions, how can we plug Islam into that? Or we've got a survey of Islam, how can we get more African and Asian Islam into a course that's traditionally been about the Middle East? We've got some good examples to work with, but we'd love to have your help identifying faculty members who have room to grow in those directions.
Kevin, if I could add to this one, being an administrator type, one of my hats is kind of administrative, who actually does try to promote this with faculty. The two things I would say, first of all, is I think this is better as not a mandate, asking, I think coming in as a heavy mandate saying faculty need to do this is probably not your best approach. But the other side is, what I really stress to faculty is that I'm not talking about them redoing everything they do. It's really coming with ideas and saying, for your course, have you thought about adding this perspective? But really, I keep stressing constantly that this is about taking what you already teach and adding a perspective to one assignment or one, it can start with literally one little assignment and then it grows to something bigger or not. Maybe it just stays as one assignment, but really stressing that it's to add a perspective. It's not meant to turn into this huge revamp of everything you do unless you want it to be. And I'll stop there because I lost my train of thought of the other thing I was going to say.
No, but Shannon, that's really helpful. Thank you. And you've had such great success at drawing in partners and colleagues at Durham Tech. So thank you for that. We're coming up on the top of the hour and we promised that we would get y'all out of here by noon. I know that y'all, after a long year of virtual teaching, are probably as bleary-eyed as all of us are. Thank you so much for joining. I've thrown once again into the chat the link for providing feedback on today's session. And both we here at the Duke UNC Area Studies Center and Consortia really appreciate y'all's honest feedback. The more information you give us, the better we can make this for y'all. And Fabiola Salas Villalobos will also be appreciating that feedback as she draws up a report and helps us to improve our programs. So thank you. To my colleagues, Katie Lindner and Beatriz Rifkol-Muñiz, do y'all have additional notes for us before we end today's session?
Perhaps just to make sure, well, first of all, to thank everybody because it has been an amazing morning. I am always impressed and this has been, it's just added so much to that. So my thank you, my personal and institutional thanks is for inspiring us, continuing to inspire us with the work that you do. And we look forward to further conversations, to further linkages, to ways that we can work together. I really, really appreciate Solomon Burnett's comments because I think it is in part the purpose of these types of events where we can make new connections and continue building on the linkages that we have. Katie, I think we just need to make sure that our panelists can transition to their session with Fabiola. Is that right?
That's right. So all the panelists from today, please stay on. Don't go anywhere. Fabiola will, I think, is probably already made the host so that she can take over. We will all be gone, so you can speak freely and honestly. But we have certainly seen you speak quite freely and honestly already, and I can only echo what all my colleagues have said before me. This has been extremely inspiring. I have a ton of notes. I had to go get a new notebook, and I have also, I've been putting a lot into my computer. Also, this is really exciting, and there's so much that we can do together. And also, thank you, Solomon. I love all of your connections and how you're bringing that all together and what you're doing right now. It's really exciting to hear. Thank you. Please visit our websites. Please email us. Please be in contact. I hope that we can all see each other in person soon, the next time we do this, right? And actually maybe share a coffee and do more together. So thank you for being here. Thank you to all of our area studies colleagues for coming together, for all the collaborations, to all of you. Just can't say thanks enough. We'll turn it over to Fabiola. Take care, everyone.